Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and maybe good night, our esteemed viewers and listeners. Welcome to the Kalikumtima Talks. We want to thank you wholeheartedly for remaining committed to this channel. Tonight, we are going to be talking about building resilience, infrastructure, inequality, and imagination. That is our theme. So it is not about floods like my friend Alfred has been imagining. The floods are just a coincidence of it. We have a team of distinguished panelists. So I want to invite you wholeheartedly to remain glued and participate actively. So it is my pleasure to welcome you to this conversation. Over the year, actually not just a couple of months, we have had very unique weather. The seasons have changed. We have floods, and the floods are bad. But like I said, this is not just about floods. We are talking about infrastructure. We are talking about policy. We are talking about implementation. This discussion comes at a critical time. Uganda has been blessed as a country. We not only have very high fertility rates, but our country is growing. So we have urban growth. We now have several cities. This is a good thing, but it is also a double-edged sword if we are not prepared to embrace the development accordingly. We must recognize the role of the different players as far as urbanization is concerned, as far as industrialization and growth are concerned. What is the role of the public sector? What is the role of the private sector? I've been asked many questions this week in regard to this discussion. Someone even asked me about the role of God. I cannot speak on behalf of God. I'm a Christian, but I have very eminent, distinguished panelists. I believe maybe some of them are well equipped to speak about the role of God. So we are going to touch different aspects. Will ensure that we do not step on any toes. Without any further ado, let me introduce my panel. On my left is my good friend, architect Vanna Mbabazi. You're most welcome.
Thank you, and greetings to all viewers.
Architect Vanna has a very big CV. In the interest of time, I'm not going to unpackage the entire CV, but she also serves on the board of the Architects Registration Board. We are deeply honored to have you.
Thank you.
On my right, I have my good friend, Associate Professor Dr. Michael Galukande Chiganda. You're most welcome, Doctor.
Thank you, Council.
Doctor is a senior lecturer at UMI, Uganda Management Institute. He's also a seasoned senior urban planner. On my extreme right, I have my friend, Dr. Jerome Sebaduka Lugumira, who is the Principal Environment Officer with NEMA. He works under the Department of Natural Resources. He has a very huge CV, but his roles touch soil and land use. He has worked in NEMA for quite some time. I remember the time when he was the head of enforcement. I'm sure, Doctor, you had an interesting experience, which you will share with us. And I remain Kalikumtima Deo, the chief servant at Kalikumtima and Company Advocates, and your moderator tonight. Allow me first quickly touch the law very, very briefly, because I want this is going to be a conversation. Though we have eminent scholars, this is not academics. It's going to be as practical as possible. Why I would like to touch the law, people keep asking, but do we have the laws in place? Yes, we do. The question is, are these laws adequate? And are they implemented and enforced accordingly? We do have, viewers and listeners, we do have laws, both international conventions, but also municipal. We have our local laws. Allow me to start with the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. Objective 27, to be precise, talks about sustainable development. Excuse me. As we develop, we must not only think about yesterday and today, but we must think about future generations. That is in the law. The grand norm, the law, the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. Of course, we have our National Environment Act, which empowers NEMA to carry out its mandate to protect environmentally sensitive areas, including but not limited to wetlands, rivers, to mention but a few. I'm sure my good friend Dr. Jeremy will be touching this. We have the Land Act. We have the Physical Planning Act. These prescribe or talk about land tenure, land use, planning at national and local levels. Of course, that is the Physical Planning Act. It does touch that. We have the Building Control Act that prescribes the standards that have to be met. And it also creates the National Building Review Board and building committees. We have several Ugandans out there who do not even know that we have a National Building Review Board. I'm sure my good friend Architect Vanna will touch that. I know you do not sit with the board, but I'm aware that you do interact with the board just like Associate Professor Chiganda does. So we have a board, and its mandate is to promote and ensure planned, decent, and self-building structures. Then KCCA, the Kampala Capital City Authority, is established by statute. We have an act that gives KCCA the authority to manage urban development. This includes drainage and environmental protection in the capital city. Then we also have the Local Governments Act. One of the functions of the district councils is assisting government to preserve the environment through protection of forests, wetlands, lake shores, streams, and prevention of environmental degradation. I know you love the SDGs. Everyone is singing about SDGs. We have the COP. When I went to visit my friend Dr. Jeremy, most of his colleagues had gone for the pre-COP meeting. SDG 13 is on climate what? Action. So we have the laws in place. The question is, are we following these laws? The laws create rights. These rights have attendant duties. There has been a blame going around, pointing fingers. Oh, it is God to blame. God is punishing us. No, it is Museveni and his government. With all due respect to the President of Uganda, General Yoweri Museveni, and this is my humble opinion, he's not God. There are certain things that he cannot what? Control. But he's at the top of our leadership here. Then we have the opposition. No, the opposition is to blame. Every time we are going to have right policies in place, they shoot them down. Then you have the private sector. No. This one has built in a channel. They are building arcades. They are not planning for their... So the blame game continues. But are we solving the problems of Uganda by pointing fingers? Like I said, we have the laws, we have rights and duties. Now that we have addressed the issue of the law is settled and clear. Let us dive right into the discussion. Architect Vanna, Ladies first. Simplify, demystify our topic of discussion today from an architect's perspective. Building resilience. We are talking infrastructure. We are talking about imagination. Now, I'm sure some of our viewers and listeners are wondering, what does imagination have to do with building resilience? From your perspective as an architect, kindly break it down for us.
Thank you, Dale, and greetings once again. Well, when you talk about resilience, there are two aspects. There is the preparedness, how prepared is an urban area or an urban center, a city, a town, for these calamities or natural occurrences that happen. How prepared is the city to manage? And if things are really tough, how fast can the city get back on its feet? So resilience has those two aspects. And if we're to talk about Kampala and flooding, if I may say, how prepared is Kampala to manage heavy downpours? And are we able to spring back? Well, I think Kampala is blessed, really. We have a very good natural drain. And these are the channels that you see. Kampala, interestingly, drains on two sides. One side, the Nachivubo, Kitante, Lugogo, ends up in Lake Victoria. But we have a section that also goes northward from the northern bypass onward. So Kampala really has a natural terrain that's very good. The trouble comes when we block these pathways, if I may call them, these stormwater pathways. That is where the problem comes in. So in terms of preparedness, yes, quite a bit of engineering work has been done. It is all these channels that have been built. Yes, I think that great work has been done in that aspect. What we have to now look at are the blockages, the things that block this natural flow of stormwater.
Thank you so much, Architect Vanna, but let's stretch this discussion just a little bit. I must say the floods have exposed us. They have exposed how fragile our systems are, maybe how fragile our policies are. Yes, we have been exposed, in my opinion, but from your perspective as an architect, what approaches can we deploy if we are to achieve building resilience?
Because I am an architect, but also have some expertise in human settlements. I think what is very important right from the planning onset is to zone out what they call floodplains. Floodplains are low-lying levels near rivers, for example, that if the rain is heavy, the banks will burst, and you need to have that area gazetted and nothing built on it. There was a time we saw a viral video. Water was pouring, I think, from, is it Nakasero? Pouring into the golf course. I don't know whether you saw that video. But Thank God, the golf course is what it is. It's green. So, yes, the water just found its level and went. So, in a urban planning perspective, floodplains have to be kept green, if possible. And so I think that in that sense, architects should try to advise their clients not to build very close to wetlands, to places prone to flooding.
Thank you. Architect Vanna, will be getting back to you. Associate Professor, but Doctor, the titles are too many. So allow me stick to Dr. Michael. We are unpackaging, demystifying our topic, building resilience from an urban planning perspective. unpackage this for us and bring it home to the issue of infrastructure, bring it home to the issue of floods. Do the current laws provide enough protection to protect the infrastructure?
Thank you very much, Chair and viewers. The term urban resilience is quite big. It's a broad term that is used to describe the capacity of an urban area to contain, withstand, recover, and finally adapt to shocks that may arise out of the process of urbanization. In the current era, in the sustainable development era, resilience is looked at in the spheres of economic resilience, social resilience, and environmental resilience. Economic resilience and social resilience of urban area has been going on unnoticed for a very long time, because maybe it does not result in imminent death until environmental resilience has come on board and wrapped up our urban areas to demonstrate that maybe our urban areas were not resilient enough. So the existence of environmental resilience or failure to contain, for this case the flooding, is coupled with the earlier failures to sustain economic resilience and social resilience. In the case of Kampala, for the last 30 years, to do successful business means to come to Chikugo, William Street, or Willow, and that very small down Chiseka market, very small town. If you want to sell spare parts, you must get at Chiseka market. If you want to do merchandise, groceries, Chikugo. So if you do it anywhere else, it will not work. So the entire population throughout the country comes and camps at a very compact place. Because elsewhere, it cannot work. And there are some people in the other suburbs of the city that are looking for even tenants, and they don't get it, because to the business and succeeds, you must be in that central place, the central place. Social resilience or failure to adapt socially of our cities means that to do business, you must be a particular category. And if you're not in that particular social group, you cannot navigate the dynamics of doing business and stay in the urban area, the Kampala, will all. So we are looking at a scenario of high concentration of both economic activity and the people in a very limited space where we want everything to do with Kampala to be done there, including the national stadium, including the church, including the market, including the football must be done in one very small place, putting a lot of pressure on the natural resources of that area contained. Now, when the environmental factors come in, they find suitable ground because the urban area had failed to economically and socially and be resilient. I must tell our viewers that even after the water carried the bags, the clothes, the mattresses, the traders are not willing to relocate. They want compensation, but not relocation. Now, environmental failures come. And and you have the experts here. But we shall see that these environmental failures are facilitated by both economic and social failures. They help to speed the damage. Maybe the drainages would have carried the water, but they were filled by mattresses. Because all economic activities are done in one small place. So when we talk about resilience, Chair, and urban resilience, we may not address it unless we look at the broad aspect of resilience and the driving factors. And finally, if we go even further, we shall find that issues of climate change are at play. Because the rains we experience now, this is not the first time for rains to fall in the country, but they are unprecedented. And they are unprecedented not only in Uganda, Kampala, but even globally we are finding rains unprecedented. And climate failure takes more effect in highly densely populated areas than in sparse populated areas.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. I'll be coming back to you on SD 13 to talk about climate action. In law, we have maxim, volenti non fit injuria, voluntary assumption of risk. Are you saying, without saying, that the traders assumed risk? Or should we blame God for the floods? Should we go back to the blame game and we look at the state in terms of policy and implementation? Think about it as I get back to you. My good friend, Dr. Jeremy, I want to thank you for your courage. I want to thank you for coming and joining us today. The last panel that we had, we invited people from NEMA, KCCA, and for one reason or another, they didn't show up. So I want to thank you wholeheartedly for joining us tonight. There's an interesting question that has already come through. Someone says, anonymous, please ask Dr. Jeremy, what is the cause of flooding in Kampala? But before you respond to that, let us go back to our theme, building resilience. Architect Vanna has unpackaged it. Associate Professor Dr. Michael has touched it. Kindly talk about it, but please respond to this question here. In your opinion, what is the cause of floods? And if you could also kindly touch the role, the mandate of NEMA. Our viewers and listeners, I'm sure, are very keen on hearing from you. Thank you so much, Doctor. Over to you.
Thank you, moderator, and I must thank the viewers for the time that they have given to listen and watch our discussion. But I also want to thank my colleagues, the panelists, for the deliberations. And on the issue of resilience, you see, just like our bodies, your immunity is boosted by nutrition, just as part of it. And so any resilient ecosystem, now if I'm to talk about it from a biological point of view, and where that system is managed, and where the managers are human beings, resilience is improved by policies and laws. So the question is whether, in fact, our policies and laws can or are able to address or buttress the cultural landscape to withstand the vagaries of nature. That's very important. And I know very many people who have written about this, the extent to which laws actually can foster adaptation and resilience to very many vagaries of nature. And I believe the laws we have in place are quite sensitive, and have put in place checks, but also allow the initiation of processes that encourage participation, that demand designs, and call for proactiveness in developments, whether these are public developments or private developments. And I think that is, for me, one of the things I found when I joined the regulatory machinery of the country. There was some bit of preparedness. The National Environment Act was reviewed in 2019, and if you compare it with what we had, the Act of 1995, there are quite very big differences. That, in fact, it takes into account the questions of the day, including the incorporation of assessment of risks for developments, which was never part of the previous acts. It was really casual and left to the developer. It also takes into account natural calamities as integrated into the assessment processes for environmental and social impacts. So it's very sensitive to this and builds onto the discussion that my colleagues have already talked about. And I'll give you an example. When I was still in the assessment processes proper, I used to assess agricultural projects. And so a part of the things I would look out for to support the investment would be advising on such issues, to guide on whether there is enough water so that the developer looks at alternatives for irrigation and whether the irrigation is sustainable. So we would go through those processes and you nest them very well into the approval certificate, demanding or guiding as the laws require. So that's how the laws can actually help in insulating investments against the vagaries of nature. The question that has been posed is a very good question. Floods, just like heat waves, just like droughts, are natural presentations. When you look, and I happen to have done some bit of geology, so I know the geologic history of the African continent, particularly this part of the world where we are. I know that at some point in time, for example, we had three major rivers that all used to flow westwards, that only changed direction. And when they changed direction, that's how Lake Victoria was formed, for example. So floods are a natural occurrence. The question is whether we fit within that cycle, or our developments fit within that cycle. And that's what the professor is talking about here. And my colleague, the architect, talked about it here. The role of planning, actually planning is very central to environmental management. And I sit in an office where I superintend on matters of land use planning. So without land use planning, even the environmental function is weak. And in areas where developments have not been planned, the destruction arising from such floods is huge, is very huge. I have lived in places where you read about flooding in places and the destruction is manageable because they have mitigations that are quite easy to manipulate. Netherlands is an example. Amsterdam as a city is a very good example where if it wasn't the engineering marvels and technologies that they have applied, they would have been under floods every onset of spring, but they manage. So that's bringing that home here, in fact, and I think you touched on it. We are experiencing extreme events of rains, and the question then is whether we are prepared when the temperatures increase by just 0.5 degrees, for example, so that the cycles of circulation are enforced to create more rainfall, longer in nature, but also deeper and intense. That's actually a very serious issue, whether we are prepared to operate under such conditions. And our colleagues, the engineers, of course, I'm not an engineer, but they must take a little bit of effort every other time to correct designs, and you see it every other time when they're constructing roads, when they're constructing buildings. Take so much time and effort to mitigate against such incidences. So we have to evolve as the environment we live in evolves. In fact, we have to appreciate that the environmental situation is evolving, not in our favor. Lastly, on the part of the authority where I serve, the authority was created by an Act of Parliament in 1995 with 4 major areas of focus. One is to regulate. We initiate legislation. We initiate regulations. We initiate guidelines and standards that are related to environmental management, directly or indirectly. We do supervise. The supervisory role is actually very key to the department where I live. We do coordinate environmental management in the country, but also do monitor. And monitoring here takes 2 forms: monitor interventions or programs or even plans, but also monitor occurrences and how people actually are interacting with the environment, quickly providing the necessary guidance to government where there is need to improve on policies and even the laws themselves. The functions are many, and in fact they are derived from that mandate. Our monitoring effort, the reason as to why we every 2 years produce the National State of Environment Report, which describes the state of environment within that period of review. We do have a very big responsibility to ensure that developments that have or that risk the environment in any form are subjected to environmental assessment. But at the same time, they must be routinely monitored under a very specific auditing regime that is instituted at the time when somebody is issued a certificate of approval.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jeremy. I'm glad you have decided to set your own questions and you're going to answer them. I'll be getting back to you, and we want to know, and I'm sure our viewers will want to know, are the policies that you talk about alive to the realities of the day, alive to the challenges? I'll get back to you on that. Then also, we talked about climate action. There's a lot changing. It's happening pretty fast with globalization. Are we prepared to operate under these questions? Now, from your perspective as a principal environment officer in NEMA, are we prepared, or how prepared are we? The other thing, I'm glad you studied geology. I only come close to it when I watch the nature channels. What happens when you play with nature? What happens when you tamper with the flow of water, for example? If there is a channel and you decide to play with that channel, what happens? We'll be getting back to you. Ak, how are you feeling? It's a Friday. Had a long week?
Oh, yes, a crazy one. A crazy week, yes.
2-in-1 for you. Do the current building codes and design standards adequately address the realities of the ever-changing climate. Why I say ever-changing, every day there is something new. So do these standards set by law address the realities at hand? And secondly, how are architects, the other parties for Prof here, and urban planners striking a balance between the pressure to expand urban areas and the urgent need to preserve the ecological buffers that naturally protect the city? Growing up, my neighbor here, golf course, hotel, was the wetland. For those of you who have been, you're all very old, you're actually older than me. No, actually, Vanna, you're not old. But you know that this was a what? A wetland. We had several. So we have urbanization. Surely there's going to be change. But where do we cut a balance? You come up with these drawings. That's why I'm looking at you. You sit on the board that approves or does licensing. You supervise projects. I'm not saying that you have supervised any project in a wetland. No. She's a very decent professional. Talk to us. The viewers are keen on listening or hearing from you.
Yes, thank you, Dale. Actually, when Dr. Jerome talked about the reversing rivers, that was a huge flood on Lake Victoria. I don't know if someone was living there, but I was like, oh, let's pray that it doesn't happen again. So yes, we have the Building Control Act, and there's a Building Control Act, and under it we have regulations and building codes. Now, in the building code, there is a special section on environment and energy efficiency. So, energy efficiency in buildings. But when we look at environment, there is a section in the code about drainage and stormwater management. So, the law is there. The code is there. What are you supposed to do? There is something they call green stormwater infrastructure. What does that mean? That means that you trap the rain where it falls. You don't let it run off. So what do you need, So the code is clear about green infrastructure. And of course, when it comes to stormwater drainage, it even says that, look here, just before the rains, you're supposed to clean the stormwater drains. After the very first rains, you clean again, and then you clean the drains again after the rainy season. So it's all in the code. Of course, the question of discharging, what are you not supposed to discharge in a stormwater drain? People use stormwater drains as garbage dumps, which is unfortunate. So the law is there. The problem is enforcement. Right from design, building approval, development and building approval, construction, management and inspection, and also in the operation of these structures. That is really where the problem is. I think the laws we have are a good start, if only we can enforce them. I'll give an example. As architects, we have a bylaw on, signboards, building signboards, that construction is a public issue. The public needs to know what you're building. This concept or thought that because it is my land, I can do whatever I want. No, it's supposed to be, the public needs to know. So recently I was seeing, I saw, these documents that keep making rounds on social media. I saw the Engineer Registration Board asking KCCA, who is the engineer on this project? Now, with this signboard law, you're supposed to have a signpost that tells you what the building is, who is the developer, who is the contractor, who are the consulting architects, the architects, engineers, everything is supposed to be on the signboard, so that when an issue happens, you don't start now looking for. So something as simple as that, for example, you find it's not enforced. So just to give an example, what we also put in place as a board is to say that if this billboard has an architect's name, there's a QR code that you can scan and get all the details of the project. Do projects have these signboards up, you know? And it's only when trouble happens that people start looking for the consultants and the designers. But that's just one of the many laws that are not well enforced. And I think that is a problem. Design and then approvals. Like I said, the signboard has to have the building permit number. It has to be clearly displayed. Most likely, some projects don't have building permits. And then the question is, what happens when a disaster happens? Who? It's just enforcement that's a problem. Yeah, thank you.
The question is, who's supposed to do the enforcement?
The local governments. The local government. Yeah, the local government is mandated to do enforcement, and in that sense, they try to ensure that there are professional consultants on the team, so that I don't know that to say the burden is shared, but the buck falls on the local government. Yeah, by law they are supposed to enforce. Yeah.
Thank you. Prof, before I get to you, I'll quickly run to Dr. Jeremy because of, you can guess why. She talked about enforcement. What do you have to say about enforcement? Is it part of the mandate of NEMA, or should we leave it to the local governments? Is this mandate synced? Is it a dual role? I'm aware that you've headed the enforcement department of NEMA, and I'm sure you did your best. If you will, please share some of the challenges that you faced. But kindly talk about the enforcement issue.
Yeah, so enforcement, as a regulator, enforcement is part and parcel of the work that NEMA does. And whether it is noise, whether it is waste management, whether it is wetland degradation, whether somebody is diverting a river or a lake or whatever, it's part and parcel of our work. But the way the law is structured, and if you refer to the Local Government Act, just like the KCC Act, there's shared responsibility, and there are specific ecosystems or resources that are vested in the hands of particular government agencies. And I'll give an example of wetlands, for example. Routinely, the Wetlands Management Department pretends local governments, urban authorities where wetlands are supposed to participate and actually take lead in doing their work. The National Environment Act tells us that where there is failure, then NEMA takes over the responsibility as supervisors of that segment of the environment. Wildlife conservation areas are under the protection of UWA. UWA is directly supervised by the Ministry of Tourism. Where there are environmental resources, we are directly interested. And I'll give you an example where, for example, somebody is mining sand in a conservation area, illegally doing it, we are mandated to enforce the relevant provisions of the Act. So enforcement is part of our work. And you have heard us do it. We have been to courts under different circumstances, following up cases, prosecuting people, offenders, etc., etc. So we do that work. I think for most of the situations, I think it's the weaknesses in law. It is too structured that in a way it is very easy to beat or to go around it if you don't act on an offense and the offender. And I'll give you an example. So when somebody degrades a wetland, we begin by issuing an order. That order can be somebody can request to review the order. The law requires the law protects the degrader or gives the degrader the opportunity to contest. Some of the reasons for contestation are actually legitimate reasons. Most of the time they are questionable reasons, and you'll see that they are using the law to get around the problems. But if well used, and I say if well applied, in terms of time, in terms of effort, and everybody is on board, the law is actually very good. If only everybody acts in the same way. And so that initially we didn't have a police, now we have a police or a force. So initially we were wholly relying to the Uganda Police Force. It created a unit called the Environment Police Protection Unit, and we were relying on them. And they are thin also on the ground. So like around this time, most of them have been deployed to work on campaigns, and you expect that you will not have them at the peak of the campaign season. So imagine if we didn't have an alternative, which is our own force, the Environment Police Force. It would be very, very difficult. So the challenges we had have been solved. So one of the challenges we had was on manpower. It was a very serious challenge. So you had to rely on, and so you have to go and pick on territorial police. You don't know what they have discussed with the degraders. You don't know how they know the degraders. They are under the supervision of their DPCs and OCs, DPCs and other PCs. It was a little bit challenging. So the command and control wasn't under us. It was purely under the Uganda Police Force. They could do what they could do, of course, within limits of funding, within limits of manpower, and you would appreciate those complexities. But at the same time, the whole process sometimes evolves into a political. There's a lot of politics, and politics plays a very big role at all levels. So where there is very, very limited support, of course, you can't progress, and that's why we usually run to the president. Or at least the Prime Minister. So sometimes politicians meddle into works, whether these are chairpersons of villages, chairpersons of parishes, chairpersons of sub-counties, chairpersons of districts, meddle into work, and sometimes co-opt everybody. And I'll give you an example. Quite recently, when we did enforcement in Impigi, you could readily tell that there was a bigger hand in the entire situation, because the police could not act freely. Even where the regional police that works with us, the EPPU, were on our side, you could really tell that there are issues. They have been told to back off. And of course, for us, we have so many options. Then you quickly run to where there is a bigger command, and that's when you unseat the degraders. So it's a little bit very complicated, but we work under such complicated scenarios or situations. So the little that we do, the little that appears to be done, actually is done under very, very serious contestations from all corners. everybody is dissatisfied. They will tell you that you have not broken Starbucks. You have broken the other person. Those stories of Rubiji. Some people don't understand why Starbucks is there. They will say Starbucks paid so much money to somebody, and you don't have the opportunity to explain to the public how, for example, Starbucks was established. There was a case, I remember, in 2021 or before, around Mandela. People said Mandela had taken up a wetland. I happen to have studied in Masaka. I know that place very well. The biggest part of that area was at a wetland. Actually, that's where Mitiana Road was, And so you don't have that opportunity to explain to people and align them. The topographic maps are actually there, where that road used to be, the roundabout used to be, and has been moved quite recently. So people who have lived recently will comment on things that are very historical and have no idea. The other example I will give you is, again, I have read several commentaries in newspapers where somebody says, there is a hotel that was built by somebody extending a kilometer into Lake Victoria. Then you have satellite images. For us, we have benefit of satellite images. Again, we don't have the opportunity to put these across to the public and tell them that, this was the boundary of the lake at this time. This is how the lake has moved. It has ingressed here. It is receding there. So those are some of the challenges that usually we don't have baseline information. And the problem, of course, is that we don't have a reading culture. By the way, the State of Environment reports submitted to NEMA are public documents. So anybody who is interested can access the institution and request for a State of Environment report to look at that document. One of the things that we look out for and demand a developer to do when they are preparing the State of Environment report, the Environment and Social Impact Assessment reports, is to provide the baseline information on every aspect of the environment where the development is going to take place. Of course, sometimes we constrain them to the time intervals, but we require that they give us baseline information so that our decisions are informed. And so, again, where there is lack of information on the historical land uses in the area, that of course breeds some bit of suspicion on the part of the public on whether I know places which were never wet, but quite recently have become wet because sometimes roads are dissecting hills and concentrating water in particular areas. So when an environment officer goes to a place such as that and makes a decision to arrest or to prosecute, sometimes the cases collapse in court because there is historical information to the fact that such a place was actually dry. An example I can give you is on the bypass, especially the stretch between Ntinda and the Bweyogerere. That road actually impacted on drainage in most of those places, and areas that were not necessarily very wet have become very wet. Areas that were wet have actually dried because water was moved and places have been drying. Of course, some people take advantage. An area that was originally wet, as far as we are concerned, is maintained as a wet area until it is degazetted by an instrument. That's what the law requires us to do. So those are some of the challenges we have. It is politics. It is elitism. We have had people who use their offices. This is Dr. Rugumira. He works in the NEMA. He goes and buys land, a piece of land in Bugolovi. A wetland in Bugolovi is connected. He knows the town clerk of Machindie. He can influence the process and get a title. He can also go and displace a settlement, like in Chiwunya, formerly wetland, and takes over the area. Elitism is very common, and it's very difficult to fight, especially where the local leaders have been oiled with money. It's very difficult.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Jeremy. Why don't you carry out sensitization? You're going to answer that question. But tonight, we give you a free platform. Part of our mandate as Kali Community and Company advocates is to sensitize the public, because I believe you have the budget for this. The sensitization is necessary, because when you do not sensitize Ugandans, they will accuse you Tonight you will also have an opportunity to appraise yourself. You will have a scorecard. Rate yourself. Out of 100, where do you fall? There has been lots of accusations on selective application of the law. You did touch it slightly. We are going to go a little bit deep. These big hands and the small hands are a challenge. How do we navigate these challenges? Because out of this discussion, we are going to advance solutions. Because the big hands are alive today, tomorrow they will not be, but the infrastructure will be. We need to give Ugandans solutions. And of course, I'll also request you to touch the policies in place that you implement as NEMA. Are they alive to the realities of the day? Do they address the challenges? And how prepared are we to operate under the current climatic conditions? I'll also request you to touch the issue of gazetted wetlands and the newly formed wetlands. There's a lot of confusion there. So we shall use this opportunity, and you're going to sensitize Ugandans about these classifications of wetlands. I'll get back to you. Dr. Michael, the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, Article 26 to be precise, gives Ugandans the right to own property. The same Constitution gives Ugandans the right to trade. You did talk about economic resilience. You touched social resilience. How do we balance between profit maximization and urban development? We are talking about sustainable development now. Infrastructure resilience. How do we balance the two? Especially those of us in the private sector. People are looking at profit maximization. That's why someone looks at an idle resource, he says, this is a channel. What do I do with this channel? That's part of imagination, right? What do I do with this channel? You travel, you go to Europe, you go to the East. They're actually building on top of these channels, but the question is, how are they doing it? But we'll get to that. Let us first touch the issue of balancing between profit maximization and sustainable development. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Chair. What you have not talked about is that the Constitution also gives governments the mandate to regulate society. And in an urban area, one of the critical regulations is the trade order. Because majority of people come to urban area to do business, government has a responsibility to regulate the way the private sector does business, even if they are using their own capital, and the regulations would cause an order. The order can even be spatial, dictating what type of businesses can be done in one particular place or another. Now, we have a problem, a dilemma. I think it is a legal dilemma. The right to land being misinterpreted as the right to land use. The right to land is given by our Constitution, but the right to land use is regulated by governments through proper planning. If everybody did what he or she wanted to do on land, anywhere, at any place, there would be total chaos. The same should be taken in the sphere of trade. If anybody did any trade he wished to do in any geographical place, it creates confusion. Now, whereas you have the right to do business, but where you place it becomes a requirement of government. That's why there are licenses. The dilemma we have here is that our governments and local governments continue to license people to do businesses in areas that no careful thought has been taken about the other factors associated with such a business. I normally find some people selling sugar canes in town, innovative. But after peeling off the sugar canes, the peels are left where someone has been vending, and it becomes a nuisance. Now, whereas we have concentrated on planning for the infrastructure, and we have both the drainage master plan and the national physical development plan, I think we need also to plan for a national economic activity plan. What should be done where? These architects and engineers, when they are providing for the drainages, for example, their wrong assumption is that the drainages are going to carry water. But the truth of the matter is that they are no longer a carrier of water only, but a carrier of water plus other items which the planning did not take consideration about. The recent scenario that we saw in the flooding in the downtown, the drainage channels were busy carrying merchandise. And I don't think the plan, the architects envisioned that at one point in time, these channels will carry mattresses and suitcases and bags and what so. We widened them all that. No, they didn't. Because the trade resilience is now coming to speed up the environmental issues. The number of people who work in that, is it a square kilometer? It is too much not to cause environmental challenges. My home area is in Namgongo, and you know, every 3rd June we get pilgrimages, and we normally say there have been very many, and they say we estimate 1 million people to have come. And that week when they are there, we do experience environmental challenges. Now, Namgongo is bigger than that downtown. But this downtown is accommodating 3 times the people who come to Namgongo on a daily basis. And government is continuing to license more infrastructure to be constructed in the same area to bring even more. Probably that 10% of the country is stationed in 1 kilometer. That stress is too much. Besides the flooding that we see, we are likely to even see the Indian challenge of heat islands. In some Indian cities, birds fall from the sky and die. They just fall from the sky and it falls down because the number of people concentrated in that particular area cannot support its life. It falls and dies. This is where we need to have an integrative approach to planning. Not only insisting on infrastructure planning, but for social and economic planning as well, to be integrated in the infrastructure planning. There is an island off the shores of Mombasa. And when you go to visit that island, in the morning you go on a tractor. You drive on the sand. When you go to the island to enjoy, by midday, the ocean has come and covered. Come back by boat. And they make sure that at any particular time they know how many people are allowed to go on the what? On the island. Now this is not the case for our company. This is not the case for our company. It's time that we considered relocating, not compensating. Relocating some businesses off that spot, the downtown, in failure of which what we saw is the beginning. We needed an engineer here to tell us whether such flooding did not significantly impact on the integrity of those structures that were flooded for some time. Because we may see the structure standing, but when the integrity of that structure is continuously being weakened by the dampness my colleague is talking about, but we are not taking any study until when the structure will collapse and another 1,000 people die, then we come up to think about this as well. We are doing business in basements, underground basements, in an area where there is no significant buffers to stop the flooding. And originally, our eyes deceive us that we have filled this wetland, so the structure can go there, the compaction is good enough to support the structure, but the long-term issue is to consider how we strategic plan on how to do business. This is how we shall overcome part of the causes of this flooding. You know, in modeling, we can look at 1,000 reasons why our infrastructure, our drainage channels have failed to be resilient. But we can point out a few factors that seem to carry stronger weight as to weakening the resilience of our infrastructure, especially in downtown Kampala. One of them is administrative. He has talked about it. Planning is an administrative process. Planning is supported by administration. When there is a weak administration, the planning cannot work. Planning and administrative effectiveness move in the same direction. In cities, municipalities of Greater Kampala, like Mukono, you will find the whole of Mukono Municipal Council with one physical planner, supported by 4 enforcement officers, taking care of close to 2 million developments taking place. What do you expect that person to do? Number 2, we are talking about Greater Kampala Metropolitan area. But administratively, there is no Greater Kampala Metropolitan area. There is no metropolitan structure for planning purposes. We don't have, and with the same people we have a metropolitan area, we have no metropolitan structure that could coordinate the physical planning in this area. For example, KCCA cannot tell us if this channel is, if the new drainage channel is built around that stretch of 800 meters, where will the water finally go? They are not concerned. Because We don't have any metropolitan planning because metropolitan planning would follow the natural channel from where it starts in Wandegea to where it finally powers into Lake Victoria. But we are only interested in following it for 800 meters where we expect people to rent. Where we don't expect people to rent, we are not concerned. So the entire administration of the city is so weak. 3, the Kampala City Authorities Act reduced devolutionary powers given to other local governments and brought it back to the central government to manage the risk. The wrong assumption was the central government was in a better position to handle. But the truth of the matter is that the central government is very far away from the realities of local governance. Because the model of administration of KCC aims to put emphasis on technical administration and limit political and citizen participation. But the technical administration is failing, the usual failure of central government being far away from the realities of people are even experienced in Kampala, even when the central government headquarters is in Kampala. It is still far away from the reality. When the Honorable Prime Minister visited the venue, said, we shall compensate. So the central government is not willing to address the root cause of the problem. They are only willing to address the short-term intervention that can enable them to have an excuse in this period, especially during election time. They don't want to mention to cause a national discussion on what is the cause of this flooding, the nature we are getting now. And the traders, because of ignorance also, they are not willing to look at alternative interventions. There is an issue of ignorance. Ignorance taking place on a national scale. Ignorance in trade, that for you to do business and succeed, you must do it around the tax pack. Whether you are selling onions, whether you are selling chapati, you are not even troubling on people, or even the taxes must be boarded there. All the economic activities must take place there. All the people of Uganda must be there, without looking at the stress this nature of arrangement puts on the environment. If somebody asked me if those shops were closed, would there be flooding in that area? I would say no, there would not be any more flooding. Because the natural resources would have capacity to contain it. The golf course here, our neighbors don't flood because they have not yet been encroached upon. At the moment they start encroaching upon them by economic activity, it will be another flood zone in the city. So the structures of government should support planning. Planning cannot be executed in isolation of governance effectiveness. Because there are factors that are drivers that the fiscal plan does not seem to look at in the short run. And if these factors are not looked at into through a national dialogue, we shall continue coming here for more discussion. Not about flooding these days, but about death in the downtown.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I'll be coming back to you to touch proactive and reactive approaches. We seem to be more reactive in Uganda, but where do we cut a balance? Adequacy of policy and policy implementation. Then, of course, what is the role of Ugandans in building resilience? We have talked about the state. Now we are coming to Ugandans. You talked about the traders. They need to know their roles. So we request you to touch that. Architect Vanna, today you're representing not just the architects, you're also representing the engineers, the quantity surveyors, to mention but a few. The good doctor did ask, did the flooding affect the structural integrity? There's clearly need to assess that. Maybe a study. Unfortunately, in this part of the world, we have so many studies. For some, we are still waiting for reports. Where the reports come out, we don't know how the recommendations are actioned. What is your take on that? Should we wait for the structures to collapse?
Well, honestly, I cannot give a definitive answer on issues of structural integrity. If a building is well built, it should be resilient. But as you know, and as we know, sometimes building inspection is very weak, so we cannot tell. So I wouldn't be able to give a definitive answer on that. But if a building is well built, it should be resilient. It should be resilient. But these construction business in basements, it would be interesting to see the approved plan of those buildings, whether the local authority approved that use. Because in the building plan, you show the use of the building. It would be interesting to see whether they approved shops in the basement. Because normally you have parking in the basement. Yeah, you had asked a question about development versus conservation.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that, in fact, as I was preparing for this talk, I saw an article way back in August by a lecturer, I think, at the College of Engineering, saying that some things that people call development is actually not development, you know. Always there is a question of human pressure when it comes to settlement. People come into town, they have to live somewhere. And so then that's when the question comes, do you keep the green or do you build for the people? And to make even matters worse, the building ends up going on and on and on, this urban sprawl, where if you have a car, for example, that consumes a lot of fuel, you don't want to be living far from the city because, you know. So I think that sometimes the way to balance conservation and development is to contain the urban centers and go vertical. You know, not to just have this horizontal sprawl on and on and on, and every wetland is taken over, you know. If we could have more dense settlements, I think you could balance development and conservation. Have the urban limits beyond which it should remain countryside, and everything happens in a smaller area, not 1 square kilometer, but you know what I'm saying, eh? Yeah, I think that is how we can balance development and conservation, if we have more dense settlements and go vertical. I don't know whether that answers that.
Yes, it does. We have started descending. We're going to be closing in a couple of minutes, so we're going to the final set of questions. Dr. Jeremy, I hope your scorecard is ready. I hope you're done appraising yourself, but before we get to you, back to you, Architect Vanna. How do we balance between aesthetics, visual transformation, and functional resilience? Now I'm going to touch the elephant in the city. The Nachivubo redevelopment, led by a private investor. Well, to many it has improved, or it is going to improve. It is actually going to improve. Some feel it's going to improve the city's beauty. Now, when it rained, we all know what happened. I'm not going to go into that. But what lessons can we draw between the disconnect between visual transformation and functional resilience? Case in point, Nachivubo channel.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting thing to look at. With the age of computer, aided design, etc., we have people producing beautiful images. Beautiful images, okay? But that is not architecture, that is not engineering. I was looking at, again, my professor, who is now the chair of the Engineers Registration Board, commenting about the channel when they were visiting it, this video that went viral. The depth of the channel, I somewhere along the discourse, they were saying, now it is becoming, it's not as deep as it was, at a certain point. So, yes, it is good to have beautiful artistic impressions, but architecture, engineering goes beyond. It has to be functional as well as aesthetic. And there's always this debate, for example, in architecture. What comes first? Form, in this case the aesthetic, or function? Does this thing work? It may look beautiful, but it doesn't work. Yeah, and I was looking at, I just tried to find out where are there any other underground water channels in the world, where? And the biggest underworld water tank reservoir is in Tokyo. I checked, Kampala has slightly more rain than Tokyo, but the way they try to manage it, they've built a huge, huge underground tank. It is 22 meters under the ground, okay? It's down under the ground, 22 meters. The size is like 3 football pitches. And the height, so after the 22, then it goes down further, 25. So they say that, okay, let all this water, get in there, and then they have high-powered pumps to pump it into the river that now takes it away. So that is their method of coping, for example, and coping with the rainwater in Tokyo, which receives almost about the same rainfall, slightly less than Kampala. So what am I trying to say? That, aesthetics is very important. It's good for the soul. You always feel good walking through Kololo, for example, than walking through downtown. But also, functionality is important. It's also important. And for me, I believe that the thing should first work, and then make sure that it also has a good aesthetic appearance. So that is what I can say about that.
All right, I'm not yet done with you. Because of time, this may be the final question before we get your parting shots. How can architects and designers ensure that redevelopment projects, particularly in flood-prone zones, actually enhance rather than obstruct the city's natural drainage system? The other question you have already answered. I was going to ask you, where else in the world have you seen channels developed? You did allude to Tokyo and the underground tank. I don't know whether the depth is the same with our Nachivubo
no.
Channel, surely it is not.
25 meters, always you divide by 3, okay, that's 8 floors, Kalina.
Yeah.
8. That's how tall or deep it is, you know. Huge. An engineer will tell you that their biggest nightmare is stormwater. That for any engineer, stormwater is their biggest nightmare. You know, one of the renowned engineers designed the warehouse, and the channel was passing under the warehouse. And after a storm, he said the stormwater just kind of shot the manhole cover, like a fountain blew it up and flooded the whole warehouse, you know? So stormwater is a force of nature. You don't play with stormwater now. And I really hope that, stormwater is crazy. It is crazy. So I do hope that it can be resolved.
So how can redevelopment projects in design enhance rather than obstruct the city's natural drainage system?
By first of all respecting the volumes, and again, even when developing, do groundwork in the dry season, for example, you know, and respecting the volumes, designing for the volumes, and always having that extra buffer, like give it like 50% extra. You know, if you expect this amount of water, add 50%, and basically, yes, because as I said, respect nature, and then all the rest will fall in line.
All right. Dr. Jeremy, I believe your scorecard is ready. Kindly touch that. Is NEMA to operate under the ever-changing climatic conditions. And maybe since it's a wrap-up, before you give us your parting shots, kindly touch the role of Ugandans in building resilience. Dr. Michael will do the same, and as Architect Vanna concludes with her parting shots, kindly also talk about the role of Ugandans. We need to know our roles. So, over to you, Dr. Jeremy. Is the scorecard ready?
Yeah, and it would be very, very subjective if I score myself. But from my own perspective, I think there is a very huge difference between what we were 10 years ago when I joined the institution and what we are now. Yeah, in terms of response to degradation, there is, and I'll give you an example. So NEMA had a staffing of about 63 technical officers. Now we are more than 200. NEMA didn't have a regional office or any regional offices. We were reliant on district local governments and urban authorities. Now we have regional offices, and so we are able to respond, not 100%, but at least appreciably, to very serious matters of degradation. So if you compare what we are versus what we used to be, we have more cases, for example, that have visited court by many folds than it used to be. And we have gotten many of those court cases concluded, and mostly in our favor. So I think in terms of those who have actually faced the rigors of our processes appreciate that in fact the environmental law bites. It's very inconveniencing. So on the aspect of enforcement, maybe we are in the 60s to 70%. We have hope that if we have all the remaining regulations required to implement the relevant sections of the Act, there will be better responses. And one of the key regulations is one that deals with the Environment Police Force, so that we have a command, where we have command over the force that just like UA does. That will be a very big improvement. Two, if we have the regulation for the National Environment Fund in place, so that local governments are supported financially to react, to act on or to intervene on matters of environmental management, it will go a long way to help them, because they struggle. The reason as to why we established our presence in regions was simply because of the difficulty to act, which has been expressed and well documented. And so if funding is available, which I believe is available, then there will be some bit of improvements in this manner. The second question you asked, maybe the last question you asked, which is actually very important, the role of, for us we call them the regulated community in resilience. Of course, the Constitution gives every citizen that responsibility to act. What sometimes frustrates people in enforcement is the fact that people are so willing to cover up, connive where there are illegalities. For me, that is the beginning. So for as long as we are not sensitive to our own environment, I don't think we can beat nature at its own game. We just can't. I mean, if you are willing to sell your property in Nakasongola to come and construct a small house in a Bugorobi wetland, then you are not responsible. You are just not responsible. If you are willing, and I have been visited by, there was a local council, one chairperson, a lady, who had parceled out a part of a wetland in Kampala during Christmas time in 2019, around COVID time, and was selling a piece of wetland at around 3 million shillings. This was about 42 by something. And there are people willing to buy. And some of the guys who are buying these pieces we arrested some, are actually very educated. They have gone to school and they have degrees. So it borders on responsibilities. How responsible are you wherever you are? I stay in Maya and I take on the responsibility. So just very near a wetland, I take on the responsibility to every weekend move around a stretch of that wetland. There's a school that was ingressing into the wetland, and I took it upon myself. Not that I'm a staff of the authority, but I thought it is wrong. Somebody was creating a football pitch within a permanent wetland, and I knew what was going to happen. From a football pitch would be classes, from classes would be plots, and there will be an estate. That's how wetlands are degraded in Uganda. So it begins with us to be sensitive about the environment. Nobody is going to educate you much more than what you already know. It is I grew up in Kampala. There are places I used to go to in Chebando that no longer exist as wetlands. It's surprising that in our times, even when we were as less educated as we are now, so much of our resources were preserved. Much more than what is being preserved now, when we have a large proportion of doctoral degree holders. And so how many universities? There used to be one, but now they're in their multitudes. It's a very huge contradiction. it's a very huge contradiction that at a time when we have over 324 certified environment practitioners, we continue to receive projects and reject projects proposed in wetlands. It is surprising that a certified environment practitioner picks money from a developer, tweaks coordinates, and wants to have an approval of a project in a wetland, well knowing that one, the law prohibits, two, there is a presidential directive. So it is just recklessness of the highest order. In fact, I am certain we shall get much more of this punishment if we are not so sensitive to what we are. We just need to be careful when we are relating with the environment. Water is one of the most destructive forces of nature. Yeah, it's one of the most destructive, and it destroys urban structures carefully without you knowing. You only know when you are dead, when the building has collapsed on you. Tororo Girls' School was sinking around the time I was in high school or university, and nobody knew why it was sinking. Some dormitories were sinking, but simply because it had been constructed on a wrong surface that was over time denied of natural processes and was collapsing upon the weight of the building on top of it. So these are examples that show us that we must be a little bit proactive as human beings, as individuals, and we don't have to wait for NEMA. In fact, it is wrong for somebody to say, let us wait for NEMA to come and address an aspect of noise pollution on a village, when the regulations are very clear. We can come to act. In fact, it's our responsibility. It's the responsibility of urban authorities to act, but at least the communities, the society, the regulated environment must be proactive and not necessarily lead, but at least watch over the environment they survive in. So I forget the second question in between. What was that question?
No, I'll be coming back to you. You did answer all the questions, Dr. Jeremy. I'll be coming back to you with the kindly touch buffer zones and the gazetted wetlands and the new ones, let's briefly. And solutions, we are interested in solutions. I will request you to be brief when I do. Over to you, Dr. Michael, very briefly. We are out of time. Every speech in Uganda ends with, for God and my country. For God and my country. So we do love our country so much, but more importantly, we love God. The question is, are we doing our part? Let's talk about policy. Briefly, are these policies there? If they are there, are they adequate? Their implementation? Do we have adequate implementation of policies, Dr. Michael? And secondly, in your opinion, the role of Ugandans in building resilience. As a seasoned senior urban planner, talk to us. Then lastly, the issue of Nachivubo Channel. What are your recommendations or opinion about the ongoing developments thereon? Briefly, then I'll come to you, Architect Vanna, for your parting shots. Then I'll conclude with the seasoned scholars. Dr. Michael?
Thank you very much. I think we have policies. We have the national urban policy. We have the national land use policy. We have the national environmental policy. And many other laws, frameworks, guidelines, and standards that would offer a framework of addressing and ensuring urban resilience. But the fact of the matter is that policies are implemented in a context. They are not self-executing. Having a policy is one, and implementing it is another. The biggest challenge we have had that despite having the policies, the framework within which the policies are implemented is lacking. And it is lacking from even the basic ingredients that would make a policy successful. Some cases we lack structures within which to implement these policies. Sometimes we lack personnel within which to implement these policies. The greatest challenge is funding. We have no funds to implement our own set policies. And in the absence of all those and other component factors, our policies have become redundant. They are not actually, though they are good, they are not applicable to the situations that we are facing. We need, therefore, as Ugandans, what can we do? The whole issue is stakeholder engagement. Globally, governments have consistently and steadily lost grasp of effective governance. And governance is resorting to people to govern themselves. The government that used to have control over everything through regulations are being driven in a corner of consensus and citizen participation. Here, education and self-aware and sensitization, awareness play a greater role in creating resilient urban areas greater than enforcement, because enforcement has become increasingly difficult because of very many other factors. It is time that we brought the common people, the Ugandans, at the forefront of urban resilience, and that the people themselves should be the biggest actor in urban resilience. The Natural Channel, it is a tragedy. In the last discussion we had here, it was before this, and I did say that it was a problem of problems. But the big aspect of this problem is not about the Natural Channel. It is about how do we use and access public spaces. Because Natural Channel was the remaining public space in that 1 square kilometer. And somebody else was to say, I want to get it. We have a law on procurement and disposal of public assets. We have no effective law on the usage of public space. And who is responsible? Of course, they are contradictory between political planning and technical planning. But on the face of it all, if I was asked my opinion, I would advise that we leave it as a public space. Because I've already told you that the population that is occupying that area is too much for the natural resources to contain. Now, the remaining channel is being designed to carry water, but the experience we have done is that it should prepare to carry containers of merchandise as well, which I think the architecture designs have not prepared for. I would advise that instead of compensating traders, the strategic intervention would be resettling that business district. Because the compensation of traders is a seasonal, but the longer term is to urban decongestion. Let us decongest that natural area. Those of you who are older and are watching me, in the 90s and early 2000s, the issue in Nachivubo was burning of the parkyard. Do you remember? It was burnt several times. And the traders would wake up in the morning to find burnt. And the parkyard came because Owino market was full. So because many traders were coming, they tried to trade in the reserved and planned parkyard. And after the burning, some wise investor came and said, no, let me build for you structures. They reserved the channel. Now they are saying, let us also take the channel. But what the construction, the architects are doing in the channel is not the reality. The reality is that the channel is going to carry more than what the architectural designs are providing for. And the best thing is to leave it and invest in urban blue enterprises. In fact, if I was responsible for this planning, I would channel Lake Victoria water and bring it up to Nachivu. I would dig, if I was a Trump, I would dig a trench and bring the water from Lake Victoria and bring it up to Nachivubo. And we start designing businesses that can survive within that blue enterprises. We cannot block that water. And no investor can take over responsibility for constructing that channel because the channel has a beginning and an end. It must drain in some area which is not being catered for. We need to open it up. And for the traders, we need to start relocating these traders, decongesting that area, not encouraging, not licensing any further constructions there in the downtown, but encouraging to create corridors where other forms of trade can take place, considering the number of people who do big activities. I would close the old tax park and the new tax park and relocate them to some other places. And remove the occurrence of people in one particular place. When all those are done, then there will be some space to create more permeability of the soils, to accommodate more water, and to reduce the flooding of that area. That is my advice about that channel.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Michael. You know, I have a very magnetic mind. Now, when will all this be done? That's what I'm asking myself. But thank you. I'll be coming back to you shortly. I'll ask you for your parting shots. Our director, Alfred, and the producer, Elizabeth, do we have any questions from the audience before we go back to our panelists for their parting shots? Alfred and Elizabeth, do we have any questions from the audience? Sustainable development is not an event. It is a process. It is a process that comes with responsibility. It is a process that comes with the need for transparency. It is a process that comes with the need for accountability. It is very clear that pointing fingers is not going to solve our problems as a country. It is also very
vertical expansion with the open green as much as possible. That is what I could say. And also this idea of a neighborhood design where you can walk to work, you can walk to school, you can walk to church. Yeah, I think that would cut down on all the traffic and the resultant carbon emissions. It would keep us healthy. We are walking, we are cycling. And if we could come down to about 10% of the border we have now to reduce border, then I think, yeah, because border travel is, it has to be controlled. There are just too many on the road when you talk about trade order. That is what I see, really, yeah.
Thank you. I'll kindly request you to give us your parting shots. You're talking about walking to work. We're in a political season, eh?
Oh no, I know. For me, I know that very many people walk to work.
Yeah.
And on an economic point of view, because you don't want to spend this 1,000 on a border or taxi, you save it in a month. You're saving 30,000. So that's the of course. So my parting shot, it reminds me of a talk I had from a renowned Ugandan, Mr. Mbire, who said that the most important ministry right now is the Ministry of National Guidance. We need to all together as Ugandans be guided on how to, say, police ourselves, be given direction. I had a doctor saying that some people don't know their rights. So if people knew the rights they had, with regard to the environment, there would be a lot of things that don't go wrong because people arrest it beforehand. So that's my parting shot.
Thank you so much, Actor Vanna. Dr. Jerome, before you give us your parting shots, question for you here. If you could reimagine Kampala in 20 years, hopefully you'll still be working with NEMA. What would a truly resilient city look like for you?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think 20 years, I am, next year will be 50 years. So I have there 10 years in service. I am privy to very good scientific information, especially arising from modeling the course of climate change over the next 30 years. It is, I am not seeing ourselves working ourselves out of the challenges that we are most likely. Lake Victoria is going to continue rising, first of all, with the waters and the rains and the interrupted flows by dams upstream. It only has one exit, and that's the Nile. The other exit is by evaporation. So we just need to act smart. I imagine there are places that are going to be wetter than they are now, with the increased concrete pavements and everywhere. So I would imagine some places are going to become drier, groundwater is going to disappear, surface runoff is going to increase, frequency of flooding is going to be as high. In fact, when they had just constructed that highway by the bypass, it wasn't flooding, right?
No.
But now it is flooding. That should be evidence that there is something that is coming. So those events, extreme events of flooding, are going to become more frequent. And Kampala is really in a belt of it's one of the places that receive too much rain. The projections suggest in part in some models that it's going to be more intense, longer seasons for part of there and shorter, like for example the second part of there is going to be wetter than it used to be. The earlier parts of there are going to be drier than they used to be, but with some bit of rain. So our Christmases might be more flooded than they used to be. And I would imagine places like Chetinda, places like Bugolobi, VC, Centenary Park, EAC places, they're trying to do some bit of works in the industrial area. I don't think they can manage the flows that are going to come from the tarmacking, paving of Naguru Hills, Kororo Hills, the misaligned drainage. Somewhat has been thrown elsewhere. So Chambogo area, Chinawataka, some places must be deserted. Unfortunately, I don't think our technology is improving fast enough to counter. In terms of design and construction, maybe it's poverty, so that there are more resilient structures in place to withstand those forces of nature. So it's going to be rough, and we don't have so much time. So if you think about it, we are already living within the times of climate change. Yeah. So just as a parting shot, I think I would emphasize that we don't have so much time to think around with policies. What we have seems to be sufficient to be of use. We just have to put our act together, and whether you're a regulator, whether you are an engineer, whether you're a planner, whether you're an investor, there's need to be a little bit more sensible and put our resources to where they can best serve us. Otherwise, we just can't run away with it like that. We just can't.
Wow. Dr. Jeremy, you scared many of us there, but that is the reality. Thank you so much. Associate Professor Dr. Michael, very briefly, your parting shots.
In the very near future, the infrastructure in Kampala is going to be highly outdated, stressed, and non-functional. And we are in a fix, a policy fix. Many countries have adopted metropolitan planning, but because of our politics and history, we have failed to embrace metropolitan planning. Metropolitan planning means planning for a bigger area, because Kampala is experiencing both urbanization and urban growth taking place at the same time and at a high speed of about 5% per annum. The options shall be cocktail. The immediate one is to decongest Kampala, and we can decongest it economically and administratively. We seriously need to think about relocating the administration of this country from this area, because the geography can no longer support it, and because the administration is accompanied by 80% of the national budget, because 80% of the national budget is being spent in Kampala. So when the capital city of Uganda, the administrative city of Uganda moves away to another geographical area, it will go by 80% of the budget spending, and that 80% will be followed by a significant part of economic activity. Now, after decongesting, we need to redevelop Kampala through a corridor development approach. Kampala can no longer be developed as a unified city. We need to get a section of Kampala and say, now we are developing in Nakasero, Kololo, and downtown. And we spend money on that, we develop it, we make it resilient. After some time, we say, now we are going to Nakawa. We handle it like that, but we cannot have developed it through a master plan because it has become out of control for us to do. My parting shot is that the city is not for a government, the city is for the people. The role of the masses in determining the future of this city must be prioritized. Because whenever there is a problem, we say, KCCA is responsible. KCCA. But yes, KCCA might be responsible. But we urban dwellers are also responsible to some extent in what is taking place in this country. Let us bring to the forefront the people, and let us involve them in any efforts to see the future of Kampala. But the unfortunate part of it, I think, we have passed the time where some corrections can be done. We need another city, probably two, one administrative and the other commercial. Then when we decongest this, we can now come back to Kampala to solve the problems that happened in the last 40 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michael. And our esteemed panelists. We will always say, for God and my country, but it's not enough. God does love Uganda, but we must be intentional. Dr. Jeremy did paint an interesting picture, and that is the reality, very realistic. But it's not all doom and gloom. This is a call to action. We must be intentional. As Ugandans, fellow countrymen and women, we are not going to leave everything to the state. The laws do establish rights, but these rights come with attendant duties. We must do our part in order to enjoy those rights. This comes with responsibility to the state, to our dear leadership. We must be proactive, not reactionary. Climate action is not a joke. When we talk about sustainable development, we are talking about the current and future generations. We must put aside our political sentiments. This is not about politics. This is about life. We must be united as a country. Dr. Jeremy did talk about funding. People will always say, there's no money, the funds will not be enough. Corruption, one of the highest ranked in the world. We must reset our priorities. The time is now. The clock is ticking. But like I said, it's not all doom and gloom. For the private sector, there is need to cut a balance between sustainable development and profit maximization. To the leadership, there is very urgent need to decongest Kampala. This has been mooted for the longest time possible that we now sound like broken records. It needs to happen yesterday. Let us not get submerged in excuses. We do not have the budget. We do not have. Someone asked, where shall we be 20 years? Where will Kampala be? If we do not act now, there will be no Kampala to talk about. For as long as we treat it as a joke, and it is not. There is need to redevelop Kampala. The good doctor did posit through a corridor approach. Of course, there's need for studies and everything, but there must be a step taken. We must start taking the steps today. Akvana did talk about urban limits and dense settlements. Everyone is running to the city. Someone needs to put this to a stop. The question is, who allows it? But again, why are you going there? There is need for a national economic activity plan. But again, we have too many policies, and Dr. Michael did state many of them are actually just idle. It is not enough to have policies if we cannot implement them. Many times we run across benchmarking. We even forget that we have our own context here. What applies to Japan may not apply to Uganda. We must apply with the necessary modification. There is need for an integrative approach to planning. If we are going to achieve economic and social resilience, there must be an integrative approach. We must have a strategic plan on how to do business. Fortunately today, the public sector and the private sector do interact a lot more. We have the presidential forum, we have the CEO forum. We just need to be more intentional and more practical in our discourse. Beyond the SC, the cocktails. What do we deliberate upon? And when do we action what we deliberate upon? The laws are there. We are aware that there are gaps. But what are we doing with the existing laws? Implementation, enforcement. And here we all have a role to play, especially as citizens. This is our second series. We shall be back for our third. Hopefully then Dr. Michael will have an engineer. We'll also have someone from KCCA. I want to thank you wholeheartedly, our esteemed panelists, for taking off time off your very busy schedules. Sensitization is very key. I want to thank Kaliko Mutima and Company Advocates for filling the information gap. We have a campaign. No one pays us. This is not about politics. We have a drive to sensitize the masses. I want to thank our audience, our dear viewers and listeners. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your time. To our crew, Alfred, our director, Elizabeth, Isaac, the entire team, the camera team, thank you so much for making this possible. We'll be back. Have yourselves a very pleasant night, morning, and day. And like it is said commonly in my country, for God and my country. I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.